Welcome again. Thank you everybody for joining us for another Spincast edition here at Stay Plugged In. Joining us today, we have Karen RUGGLES. She is the Assistant Professor for Computer Science at DeSales University. And on top of that, she finds time to also be the director of their Esports program as well. So very busy, but I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to join us today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the time of your viewers as well.
All righty. Well, let's just jump into it. If you don't mind, if you would just tell us a little bit about your background, how you kind of got into the esports world in general, but then also how that led to the director of the esports program at DeSales for you.
Sure. Well, I guess it's sort of been a long road for me. I started, gaming as a hobby with my older brother when we were little, and I was always kind of the map holder, growing up until I could hold a controller, and then we really paved the way with everywhere from NES up to PlayStation and beyond, including PC, obviously. So I was always in the scene, always had that drive, and I love the storytelling and just entertainment value and everything surrounding games, the culture, and the way that it can bring people together. So when we were starting the conversation at DeSales University to start an esports program, it was sort of second nature that I was in that conversation because I already had that long history of knowledge and love for games. I don't play as much as my students do. So I also have two little ones running around at home. So I love to watch them play and be their sort of side coach mom, if you will. But it's really an invigorating process. And for me, to answer the other part of your question, my journey to be involved really sprouted from the students' opportunities. So I can see, obviously, esports is a huge organization, just a huge industry. Mm-hmm. So for me as an educator, it's a way for students to learn more about an industry and how they might fit into that space. So whether that be as a consumer, being a educated consumer, or as a player, or anywhere in between, broadcaster, shoutcaster, doing the business side, or being a coach. There's a lot of different spaces where people can be involved, just like any other sport. And obviously, there's the pro level, the more academy level, the collegiate level now is growing and only going to grow further. So there's a lot of different spaces that students can look to in the future, either more hobbyist or more seriously. So as an educator, it was only natural that I would want to provide that space for my students to understand something further and ask questions. So that's really where I find my passion for that.
Awesome. And what's interesting that I have found through some conversations, and it's probably somewhat similar, I would assume, at DeSales, but the opportunities within a program are even more significant than traditional sports. And what I mean by that is typically with a traditional sport, let's take baseball, for example, you might have a team manager, someone that comes in as a trainer, someone that potentially keeps the scorebook, things like that, maybe even some announcing and things of that nature. But that's incredibly similar to what you see in most esports programs, where the students are the ones really, for the most part, kind of running the event, potentially broadcasting, social media, and on and on and on. Tell us a little bit about the program there at DeSales. How is that structure set up for them?
Sure. Well, we're definitely growing, and I'm having more and more conversations about making a very robust program that's associated with DeSales. So, for example, recruiting shoutcasters or recruiting social media managers, and not necessarily being a part of the varsity team, but being there as part of the team to allow that to reach further. And even, for one of my seniors, now this was for more traditional field sports, but teaching digital art, she was interested in sports media. Yep. So, that's a space where being a social media manager, being, creating websites or different graphics that update either whether it's a live event or a Twitter feed to say, hey, we won the game, or this is a player profile. There's definitely marketing involved with that. So in terms of how we run our program, I bring up these ideas of either a work study position or a recruited position where students can learn in the classroom and then apply that in real time, if you will, to the program that we have. So as the students are playing, they're also marketing experience and learning more about what does that mean. It's one thing to study a topic, but it's another thing to go out and do it. So I think that that's a very rich opportunity that some colleges have already jumped on, and I think will be part of a robust esports program for most collegiate in the future.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the opportunities there are so important that when the students are able to immerse themselves in doing those tasks as opposed to learning how to do those tasks, that's night and day. It's a win-win all the way around. So that's awesome. Talk a little bit about your program. Talk about exactly how the team makeups are, meaning how many different games do you folks play, and how many members total are on your teams?
Sure. So we compete in Overwatch and League of Legends. We did have a few students who wanted to do Hearthstone I guess this past semester, and so they were already on the League of Legends and Overwatch team. So I said, sure, I'll basically pay for it if you guys want to try it, and we'll see how the competition goes if that's something that you want to continue to do, and that would be sort of above and beyond their Overwatch or League of Legends duties. So we compete in those two titles, and we're looking to grow. Of course, we don't want to go boom or bust. We don't want to add every single title out there and then just leave it up to the wolves. So we started with League of Legends last spring and continued this academic year. This academic year, we welcomed our Overwatch team with a few students on campus who already played, and I want to say 7 incoming freshmen. So we had enough to field 2 Overwatch teams, and then 1 League of Legends teams with a few alternates for that team. So pretty healthy number. In our dedicated arena, we have 24 spaces, 24 computers for students. So we had enough this year that everyone had their own station, and I'm looking to grow the program once we are healthy enough that we can grow. And I always get the question, well, why did you start with League and Overwatch? And I guess personally it's the titles that I enjoy watching. Rocket League was definitely on my radar because it's very easy to explain. League of Legends, you can't just sit down and watch necessarily. But I equate that. My husband is a diehard Philadelphia Phillies baseball team fan. So and so when we first started dating, I grew up in a household where we watched football. So I never really appreciated the pace of baseball. And when we first started watching, I knew the basics of, stealing a base and what have you. And we would be watching, and he's like, "Oh no, a bulk." I'm like, "What is that? Like, what are you talking about?" And I'm in my 20s at this point, so it's one of those things that I don't think a lot of people think about when they think about sports, because it's not specifically intuitive. There's a structure of rules that you learn, and most of us, well, probably many of us, learn that while we're growing up. And while it's easy to ask questions and you feel like, well, what is a first down, daddy or mommy or whomever, and then you learn through that childhood process. But now that a lot of people are coming in maybe at an older age and watching esports, they're like, this is unwatchable. And of course it is, it's because you don't know any of the rules and you don't know how to anticipate any gameplay, and it just looks like a big mess. And that's what football looks like if you don't know what's going on. So the idea of learning that structure is really where you'll find the appreciation for the game. So obviously, Rocket League is very easy to explain to people, and the watchability of that translates almost immediately. Soccer with cars, and there you go, we're off running. But League of Legends and Overwatch, I specifically like, growing up with GoldenEye 007. You see the translation with Overwatch, and with League of Legends, it's just astronomical, the amount of strategy and that goes into that. So I'm definitely into strategy games, and that's really, you know, the teamwork and the how to anticipate other people's play and play together. It's just the team orient of League of Legends and Overwatch really drew me to add those as our first titles. But we are looking to grow. I just want to make sure that we have a good experience for the students, and not just grab titles because we want to recruit as many people as possible.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Slow but steady growth assures that your program is going to grow in a good way as well. But you brought up a couple interesting points, which I agree with wholeheartedly, because I definitely am guilty of being one of those people that when you watch the video game, being a little bit of the older generation, I look at it and I'm like, I'm not 100% sure I know what I'm watching. But to be fair, I grew up with traditional sports, whether it was baseball, football, basketball, golf, you know, that's always been around for me. And even if I don't watch one of those in particular, probably a friend of mine did or someone else in the household did. So I was familiar enough with it, even if I thought it was boring or what have you. Whereas now the demographics that really watch esports is certainly younger, but I think that makes it all the more exciting, especially for that younger generation, those middle school and high schoolers, that as they grow and get out into the workforce at some point, well, now those demographics are going to be folks that are my age are used to growing up with esports and watching it and everything else. And everyone else behind them is obviously very, very savvy with what it is. So the opportunities, I think, are just going to be endless as we continue down this pathway. So, but case in point, I'm guilty of that example for sure. Talk a little bit about, as prospective students come on board and now they're part of the team, what is their day-to-day like, practice-wise, academics-wise? Obviously, you do a little bit of both. Obviously, as a professor there, you have a certain expectation for sure, but also as the director, I'm sure you want to compete and perform at the highest level. So talk a little bit about those dynamics and what students would expect from semester to semester as being part of the team.
Absolutely. So at DeSales, we are part of the and recognized as a varsity sport, where it's the 20th varsity sport at DeSales and the first co-ed varsity sport. So I'm very proud of that notch. And we usually align with their same structure. So it's effectively it goes about to be 10 to 15 hours a week that you end up practicing and you know, the matches and everything that you're sort of committed. Obviously, some students commit more than that. Usually that's the low bar is the 10 hours a week. So you effectively have 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and then matches on top of that, whatever that looks like. But obviously, you know, it's student athlete for a reason. The student always comes first. And just like anything else, I think one of the big learning objectives for students coming out of an esports program should be about balance. So how can I be part of a team, how to compete, how to be coached, which is actually, I think, a really interesting part of esports currently, because if you think about a recruit for a baseball team, you know, they likely, if they're being recruited at the varsity level, have been involved with baseball probably their whole life, you know what I mean? Or at least in high school, 1 or 2 years in high school. So many of those coaches have already benefited from what has come before them in the high school and middle school and even before, you know, so that, you know, that there's this culture of being coached, listening, and even if you don't agree with the ref or with your coach, you still play the play, you know, and just being a part of the team, you know, not like solo queuing effectively, and really listening and losing. You know, learning to lose is a really valuable skill. Learning to win gracefully is a very valuable skill. And these are all the skills that I believe are why esports is being, you know, welcomed with open arms, because these students are quick. I mean, you don't get into esports because you're a dullard, to be quite frank with you. I mean, if you just think about League of Legends or Overwatch, you need to be communicative. You need to be able, with random people. I mean, you queue up as you're not part of a team, and you're trying to communicate with people who you don't even know. So, you know, I think that the ability to communicate, the ability to work on a team, those are all things that are really, really valuable for my program, and how that obviously translates into success in the classroom and success beyond your 4 years as an undergraduate. So, you know, I think part of that is really just wrapping it so that the students can see the connection. So just like on a traditional field sport, you see people who are coached. They know how to be coached. And I think that that's an interesting space for esports, because high school is really just now starting to pick it up, just like college, and saying, okay, well, we're going to have a team too. But currently, you get a lot of students who might be a little rough around the edges in terms of being able to be coached, because they're used to sort of playing with their friends. And the pickup game of basketball that you play is different than the varsity game that you play with your team in high school. So you're able to kind of use certain language or throw an elbow or two with your pickup game, but that's not appropriate at the varsity level. So it's those boundaries that some students may already have and are ready to go. And especially with just how quick they are to learn, they're usually pretty savvy. You can't get to this level of competition in League or Overwatch with not knowing strategy. It just doesn't work. So they're very quick, but it's sometimes being part of a team can be a different feeling. To consistently have to let others lead, or let know when to jump in. So that's a really interesting space for me to coach them as a unit versus telling them what to do in the classroom to be successful in this specific field. Now I'm talking about how to be a part of a team and do the best that you can for your team.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's tremendous life lessons, because ultimately, whether you're part of the team within your family, part of the team at your job, whatever it is, you're going to be a team member, hopefully at some point. And important, learning those lessons as soon as possible and as often as possible is certainly critical. So that's awesome. Now, you talked about something earlier, you're the first co-ed club or team. Great topic, simply because there's not as much diversity in respect to women in esports, certainly as I would like to see, having a daughter that's going into her freshman year. Talk a little bit about that in terms of what your experience is and how can that be made even better?
Yeah, and I think I've had some conversations with this, because I think that there's a lack of diversity, and that's true for many different subsets. So you think about what you would need. Before I mentioned baseball, right? So if you were going to be recruited at the varsity level for baseball, you likely have been coached throughout baseball. And for a lot of those really high level collegiate teams, you see a lot of recruits coming from very warm weather states, or able to go to these sort of clinics during that time, because you can play baseball during that time. We're in Pennsylvania, so we have a whole section of the year that you can't play baseball, or at least not comfortably. So and I think obviously esports were indoors for the most part, and able to play, but there are limiting factors that you have to have a computer system that works with that, and you have to have the money for all of that. So I think there is a lot of talk about male, female, and the lack of female representation in esports, or just the culture and the representation of females in these games, which is another topic altogether. But there's also the idea of the socioeconomic status of who's in this arena, and what does that look like for the pay. Are you paying to play effectively? So I really love the idea that high schools are starting to recognize this, so that it's not necessarily, you have to have it at home to play. And that's true for if you look at lacrosse, or, something that's a little bit more expensive to own, your own equipment. Yep. And if the high schools are taking it over, then that's just going to open the gates a little bit. So I think that, the numbers are high for females in terms of gaming, but it's sort of different titles. So it's interesting just to look at those and see how that will hopefully grow, because obviously it's nothing to do with skill, right? It's not the muscles that we have, or how fast we are. It's really how fast we are in engaging the game and the gameplay and the knowledge and the competition. Right. So I love that it's the first co-ed sport, because it definitely represents what I love about competition, and it's bringing your knowledge, your practice, and how much you actually invest in the game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. A number of topics there. We can have a whole day of podcasts on this. And the lack sometimes of people being able to get onto, play games and some of the things that keeps them from, and how we can bridge that gap, certainly. But to your point, in terms of skill level, yeah, I frequently walk in on my daughter's playing on there, and she's, whether it's her friends that are male or female, they're typically calling her and say, yeah, you got to play again. You got their game of choices. They're usually it's either Apex, Fortnite, or Rocket League. So they're constantly on there, and she's always being requested to play. So that's the one cool thing about esports. Doesn't matter shape, size, color, doesn't really matter. You can play, you can play. Talk a little bit about your league in general. I was on your website a little bit earlier, saw your record from last year, but what I was impressed with is the teams you played against, because this isn't something where you're just kind of playing in your backyard and that's it. Boise State was on that list, et cetera. Talk a little bit about that competition level, whom you're playing against, and who are some of the rivals potentially that are kind of burgeoning out of the people you play against.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've taken an approach, and I think you hit the nail on the head, because that's one of the things coming into athletics and speaking to the other coaches, and even other parents or people who are asking me about esports say, oh, well, you're a D3 school. Are you a D3? What does D3 look like for esports? And I'm like, well, no, it has nothing to do with that. So we can play a Boise State. And that's they might be at a different level in other sports, but there is currently no distinction D1, D2, D3. So we actually have a really elite squad of students, and we're a D3 in our other sports. And that's not to say we have plenty of. I remember a few years back, if one of my students was recruited at a D1 school, but just fell in love with DeSales, and he came for track and field, and but he fit with our culture, so he chose that over a D1 school because of the way that he felt at home at the university, and that's really something that I think is important for the students. So don't go just to play. I mean, that's great that you're being recruited for that, but make sure that it feels comfortable and at home. But in terms of competition, that's something that I've been really exploring this past year. So there's a lot of different opportunities, whether for League of Legends, for example, there's the Collegiate League of Legends, CLOL, there's CSL, there's lots of different opportunities. We're part of ECAC, and smaller competitions or tournaments that you can engage in. And there's really nothing about being at DeSales that we have to engage in XYZ conference. So I'm using this time to really explore and see what the students like to engage in. So I've noticed with like CLOL, for example, or C-Star, to be honest, there are sometimes where students or opponents will no-show. And that's really not a good experience, for the student. They practiced all semester, and then they show up and there's a no-show, So that's something that I think is really what I'm looking for, is to try to find a healthy balance with the whether it be because so for Overwatch we're scrimming with Boise State and a couple of other St. Clair College up in Canada, and it's because we only have to worry about time zone, so it's really easy to coordinate as long as you can connect with people. You want it to be a good competition. So I know that sometimes even within a conference you can have one school that is just dominating year after year after year, and that doesn't really make a great experience because you're really not trying at that point. You want to have something that's you're working and you're training for a reason, so you don't want to get rolled every time, but you also don't want to win every time. It's just the way that finding that competition and that harmony so that the students have a really good experience, and the program is healthy.
Yeah, no doubt about it. How about rivals? Anyone in particular school-wise that you either scrim against or have played against that you look at as, wow, we really like playing against those guys for, and I don't mean rivals in a bad way, just those, that's
Yeah.
competition.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think of any school that pops out as, one that we were gunning for, or that we, I mentioned Boise State before. I know I think Doc was on your program just recently.
Mhm.
So, I love playing with Doc. He's great, and his team is great. Always open to play and to try new things and to coordinate together. I really, I enjoy that, and the healthy competition is always what we're looking for. So definitely had some matches that I can think of that were tough, and we're like, wow, that was a really great game. But at the same time, it's the I guess negative part of digital competition is that you don't necessarily have that moment before or after the game where you can really go up. I mean, you say GG, whatever, but like you don't go up and like shake the person's hand or have necessarily that face to face with the other coach or staff of the program. So it can be, in some senses, very detached from that. But what I like about some of the other collegiate programs that I work with, such as Boise State or St. Clair, or some of those type of caliber schools, is that we try to cultivate an experience, almost like a user experience for the esports programs, so that we can develop these rivals. And even if it was a game, it's not forgettable. Like, oh, who was that? I can't remember, because they don't really have a face. They're playing all the same characters, and you might see the logo in the corner, but they're like, wow, it was a great match. Next, So I think that that's something that's coming. That once each collegiate program finds really their rhythm, that it will be a good space for that friendly rivalry and healthy competition.
Yeah, I think so. I think as more and more administrative teams start to realize the opportunities, not just for the school, but for the student body, it becomes a win-win, and you'll hopefully start to see more multi-purpose event centers built up so that there is more of that intercollegiate rivalry and face-to-face competition, because I think that's a lot better, especially over time. Obviously, during this COVID-19, being able to do everything online is pretty neat, and that's a fallback. Especially from scrimming and things like that, but certainly from a social aspect and kind of growth aspect, just being able to compete face to face, I think that's probably something that most would desire, and hopefully is down the road, down the pipeline. So I guess we're starting to run out of time here, but last quick question for you would be, in this space, there's a ton of good stuff. I know that, but certainly there's certain things that most schools look at their program, or esports in general, along the collegiate level, that, man, I wish this was a little different, or I wish we focus and try to fix this issue. For you, whether it be on campus there or just widespread in esports in general, if there are things that you could change, or one thing that you say, hey, if this was done differently, I think it would be best for everyone involved, what would that be?
That's a good question. It's hard to pinpoint anything right now, because I think what's exciting about esports at the collegiate sector is that it is so new.
Yes.
So, I think that there are a lot of great programs and a lot of opportunities for people like myself and others that are like sort of pioneering this idea. So I think that there's what I really respect about that, and some of my colleagues in this space, is the respect to that pioneering aspect. So knowing that you're not just out for your own program or your own institution, but I think, and you could probably attest to this, but a lot of the people who are doing this and who are engaged are really looking for the trail that we're leaving, to say, well, how can other people, how can other institutions, make this an opportunity for their students on their campus? Right. And obviously, it's a space where we can get students recruited to campus and on campus and contributing to the social scene and student life and all of that, which is great. But at the same time, it's not, I've had so many esports directors who have helped me along the way, and it's not like the cards are up against the chest. You know, it's very much a space where everybody wants everybody to succeed, and really for the good of the students. So I think the people that you'll find who are really engaged are thinking more about this moment in time, and not necessarily what we would want to change, because we are the change, if that makes any sense. Because, you know, I think if you try to do something and it doesn't work out, then that's part of being, you know, at that front line, is saying, well, this makes sense. I'm going to let, you know, my colleagues and my expertise and my intuition lead. And that's a great way to, you know, move forward. But if it doesn't work out, then, you know, I don't really see that as a negative aspect to something I would change. It's just the time that we're in right now. So I don't think there's anything specifically that if I could look at it, I would change now.
Got it. No,
I guess maybe just like the understanding. I've been blessed at DeSales. We've had support from everyone from the, you know, I spoke with the board of trustees. The president is, you know, behind us 100%. My athletic director is behind us 100%. And I know not everybody has that same experience. You know, you might go to your athletic director who's like, guess what? Now we're doing varsity esports, and you know, from the varsity athletic standpoint, there might not be as much support. And again, at DeSales, I've had nothing but support from our AD, but I know that that's not true everywhere. So maybe just that open-mindedness for some of my colleagues, that the understanding, and I think that this podcast is doing exactly that and addressing exactly that, is more information. And rather than saying, oh, it's video games, you get a scholarship for that, what do you mean, you know, is just that moment in that space to say, well, let me learn more before I put up a wall of judgment to say this is invalidated. So I think that is going to come. I mean, it's way too big for for anybody to say otherwise. And in a few years, we're going to see pretty much every, you know, collegiate program has an esports team. It's just that's where we're headed. So I think it's coming. So I'm not too concerned about that, but that would be, I guess, for some of the pain and suffering of my colleagues, I would wish that there would be a little bit more open-mindedness of how people view entertainment, because really at the end of the day, that's what it is. Because, you know, I have a, like, let's say a neighbor, right? A neighbor who says, oh, well, esports, that's not a sport. Football, that's a sport. And I'm like, okay, well, why do you love football? Have you ever played? Well, no. Well, okay, so you watch it on TV, therefore it is a sport, you know? So I understand athleticism, and I understand, like, obviously that is a big component to the physicality of sport. But really, sport comes down to competition, and it comes down to strategy. So, you know, and I speak with a lot of our sport management faculty at DeSales, who we have the same sort of friendly conversation argument about. But, you know, and I understand in esports, you can't have that same type of physicality. It just doesn't work. But you can't touch me in competition and strategy. Like, honestly, I mean, with all of the patches that happen consistently over time, look at League of Legends. I mean, and then at the same time, understanding that if I were to come to play, you know, soccer, I can only bring my physicality and my skill set and what I can do and what I know my friends can do on the team. But in League, you have to know how you play all of these different champions and what they can do together. So the layering of that is just really, from a game design standpoint, is just really, really fascinating. So I guess, you know, that's a long answer, which I'm very much known for, but yeah.
No, that was perfect. When you hear this back, you're going to be like, that was a good answer. You'll like it. It was but to your point, yeah, you know, you mentioned kind of comparing football, for example, as a sport versus esports. I look at NASCAR because I live in NASCAR country here in Charlotte. I'm not a big NASCAR fan. I'll be the first to admit it, but there are millions upon millions upon millions of fans that are incredibly passionate about NASCAR and the physicality within that. I mean, car crashing, sure, but training and the physicality for that. Certainly there is some, just like there would be with esports, but you don't necessarily have to be the fastest person or strongest person per se to be successful at NASCAR. So anyway, sports comes in all shapes and sizes, and it's entertainment, like you said, to your point. And there's a lot of people that are entertained currently by esports, so which is a good thing. But we are basically up on time. So I sincerely appreciate you coming on board, again, talking to our audience. And again, what I always alluded to is if one person can get one piece of information that makes a difference in their life, then it's been all worth it all day long. So appreciate it. Hope you stay safe. And let's definitely touch base once we hopefully get back to some normalcy in the fall and see how you guys are doing, how the program's progressing, and kind of review where we are. So again, appreciate it. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.